Welcome back to another episode of Christian Natural Health. Today, I'm very pleased to have Dean Sikes with us. Since January 1993, Dean Sikes has dedicated himself to spreading messages of hope, traveling extensively to high schools, teen challenge centers, and prisons across the United States and internationally. To date, he has participated in over 4,200 events, delivering the empowering matter message to millions of teenagers. In addition to his outreach initiatives, Dean hosts You Matter Television, a national broadcast, and engages with tens of millions on social media annually. As a published author, he has written 32 books that serve as an invaluable resource for teenagers and their families. Dean resides in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with his wife, Lori, and their children. Welcome, Dean. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about your backstory. How did you get in, why did God call you specifically to this message to
Yeah.
teenagers?
It's really that's a great question. The interesting answer for me is always the same, and that is, I think what you and I overcome oftentimes becomes our platform.
I agree. Yeah.
And so, for me, it's the quick synopsis of my life. Grew up in a Christian home, went to Christian schools. All of my friends were Christians, and I went to church every time the doors were open. And I wouldn't have known God from Adam.
Mhm.
I had a religion, not a relationship.
Right.
And at 7 years old, my life took a turn because on a Saturday afternoon, an associate pastor from a church we attended came to our home. And I remember I prayed a prayer and I asked Jesus to come be my Lord and Savior. And I knew that day my life had changed.
Mhm.
And I ran outside. I was playing football with my best friend, Chris Frank. And I said, Chris, are you a Christian? I was so excited. And he went, am I a what? And it embarrassed me and it shut me down. And I didn't ask anybody that question for a long time.
Yeah.
Kept living life, kept doing what we do. At 15 years old, as just a pretty naive kid, I was sexually abused. And that 60-second abuse changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
And when it was over, I made a vow, and the vow was simply this: I'll never tell anybody what just happened to me.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I shut down. And after it was over, went to church with the person, went home, looked in my mirror, and for the first time in my life, I saw someone who was broken and full of shame. And yet I had done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And I meet so many teenagers who can easily relate to that part of my story. At 17 years old, I failed PE. Even though I played quarterback, taught tennis, and played golf, I was plenty athletic. I was not going to put myself in a position to ever get hurt again.
Oh,
18 and 19, my life was spiraling out of control. My drug of choice was lying. I lied more than I ever told the truth. And I lied so much you had to literally catch me telling the truth. And I lied because, the second greatest commandment in the word is love your neighbor as yourself.
mhm.
I didn't love me. So there's no way that I could love you. I can't give you what I don't have. I can't teach what I've not been taught.
Yeah, yeah.
And by the time I was 21, um, I had whatever society says makes you successful. We had a couple of airplanes in our company. We had condo and I mean, all the stuff. And I was miserable. And I said a prayer one day and I said, God, if you're real, and I don't think you are, but if you are, prove it. And, you know, I, I encourage people, don't ever ask God to prove that he's real unless you're ready.
Right.
Yep. And 2 weeks would come and go. And full transparency, there was zero faith attached to my prayer. I don't
Sure.
even remember praying it really, but I knew I'd said those words.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my office dialing a phone, and behind me, off to my left, I heard someone say, "Call mom." I swung around in my chair, saw no one, but the hair on the back of my ear knew, "Call mom." I dialed my parents' phone number, and after 7 rings, she answered the phone. Her voice was slurred. She was disoriented. In that moment in time when God, who is so very real, spoke to me and said, "Call mom," and I did so, my mother was attempting suicide.
My
She was dying. I could hear the life leaving her body. That day, I jumped in my car, drove up Interstate 75, talked to this God I did not know. And it wasn't in a version of the Bible that people, it was not King James or New King James. It was help. I need help, and my mom needs help. Can you save her? Got her to a hospital that day. And a doctor looked at my dad 45 minutes later and said, I have no medical reason to tell you what I'm getting ready to tell you. It's a miracle of God. Your wife is fine. You can go see her. I heard miracle of God. I looked straight up. I went, you've got to be kidding me. You're real? And my dad said, do you want to go see your mom? I said, no. He goes, I understand. I thought, no, you really don't. 2.5 hours ago, I'm minding my own business. The creator of the universe speaks to me to call your wife my mom. And when he does, she's literally ending her life. And now I've got a doctor with 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 2 years of residency, and years of practicing telling us he had nothing to do with this. It's a, no, Dad, I'm going for a walk.
Wow.
And, I went and I leaned against this long corridor in Park Ridge Hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I had an encounter with Jesus. And my life changed that day.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So, and given that background, you have a way to connect with people who have struggled with suicide, who have had it in their family, who've dealt with it themselves, who've had sexual abuse. So, what did that translate to? I mean, you've got 32 books. Are they all essentially focused on trying to have
No,
teens have that same encounter? Okay.
no,
So,
they're all a little different. The legacy book, if you will, is my newest one, the You Matter book, and it's why we exist as an organization. Because everywhere I go, I share with students those two words, "You matter," and they look at me and they go, "You don't know me. You don't know what I did last night." I go, "You're right, and I don't want to know what you did last night. Don't tell me. I don't want that image." Just,
sure.
but they go, "Well, how can you say with such clarity, with such conviction of heart that we matter?" I go,
Mhm.
that's such a simple answer. And it's based on Job 33:4. It says, "The Spirit of God made you, and the breath of the Almighty gives you life." God's never made a mistake. He didn't make one when He created you. If you're created, and you were created on purpose, with purpose, and for purpose. And here's the takeaway. You want to know why I tell you that you matter? You're breathing.
Mhm.
You're actually breathing. And that breath came from God. And He did it on purpose and with purpose and for purpose. And so we try to unpack the reality that no matter what you've gone through in your life, no matter how bad it's been or how tremendous it's been, God has a plan. And if you'll stay to the plan, you'll stay true to what you're called to do, you'll see your value is not based on what you do or what you've done or how many zeros there are before the decimal point in your parents' bank account.
Mhm.
It's you matter because of whose you are.
Do you find that the concept, I'm assuming so, that the concept that you matter is the core need that drives a lot of teens trying to find themselves? And if so, why? Where
Yeah.
did that lie come from that they don't matter?
Yeah. It's, well, the Bible teaches us that without a vision, people perish.
Hmm.
So if you invert that with a vision, could you change society as we know it? I
Mm-hmm.
think so. And so every day in America, 5,600 teenagers attempt suicide. That for your listeners, audience, let me give you a visual that maybe helps bring that into perspective. In an arena that seats 12,000 people, that arena would fill up every 2.5 days with teenagers who in the previous 60 hours had bought the lie that their life didn't matter. And so show me a young person who doesn't believe that their life matters. I'll show you someone who does not have any hope. And
Yeah.
hope gives faith something to hang on to.
Right. And just kind of big picture, do you feel like some of the reason why that's so pervasive in our society today has something to do with the messages of like evolution, for example, that's trying to take God out of
Yeah.
the equation? Like, yeah,
Yeah, if you go back to the 1960s, the biggest challenges in public high schools were students chewing bubble gum in class, running in the hallways, and being late to class.
yeah,
One person had enough of a vocal impact to have prayer removed from schools. Come forward to present day, I'm one of the guys they call when their schools have been shot. I've stood where students have been shot and killed. I've gone to schools that have had enormous tragedies because today the greatest three challenges are gangs, rape, and school shootings. Well, you take God out of a God-centered society, you are left with a godless society. When you go to John 10:10, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what you have here.
yeah,
But the
yeah.
greatest challenge that I see in schools today, among teenagers across the board, public schools, private schools, Christian schools, alternative schools, the greatest challenge, which also can be the greatest tool, is social media.
Okay.
No question. And we are the words teaches us all things were created by God and for God. So God created social media. It was created to be used to connect people, but it has become the most isolating tool that exists on the planet today.
Hmm.
And we use it in the last 25 months. We've had 161 million views of our videos. Now, I share that with students on every day on the road, and I tell them, notice the words I just used. We've had 161 million views, not likes.
Uh-huh.
Here's why. If you and I are still counting our likes, we have no idea how much we're loved.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, true.
students grab hold of the likes and they go, well, I need to change this, or I'm going to use this filter, or I'm going to say this, or I'm going to do this. And they're trying to fit into a society that is ever changing. If I say one thing that someone doesn't like on social media, I could lose tens of thousands of friends
Hmm.
within seconds.
Hmm.
So it's about being true to yourself. It's
Hmm.
about causing young people to go, your life really does matter. You've got something that you bring to the table. And if you weren't here, we would all be missing someone and something so very special. Don't
Hmm.
give up.
Right, yeah. And so do you think that with the proliferation of social media and the fact that everything is kind of in a spotlight, everything in our lives is now magnified. Do you feel like that is part of what's driving the mental health crisis right now?
I do because yeah, because if you look at it, and you would know this much better than I, people when they look in the mirror,
Hmm.
they're either very happy with what they see, or I'll give you an example. I had a young man in a school walk up to me. He had about 7 guys behind him. It was at the completion of an assembly. There'd probably been 2,000 students in this theater. And I looked at him and I go, before you say anything, I just want you to know you're a leader. And he goes, how did you know that? I go, well, look over your shoulder. You got 7 guys following you. True leaders have followers, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And he goes, well, yeah, actually, I'm the quarterback of the football team. I said, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And he turned around to these 7 guys and he goes, I need to talk to this guy. I'll catch you at lunch. And these 7 guys turned around and went to the cafeteria.
Wow.
So I say that to go here with you. At the end of every one of our assemblies, I ask 3 questions. Is
Mhm.
there someone you need to forgive? Do you feel like you've been rejected? Because on the other side of rejection is acceptance. And is suicide a real option? And this young man looked at me and he goes, I want you to know I raised my hand for all 3 of your questions.
Wow.
I said, well, tell me about your life. And he begins to unpack it. He goes, well, I've got a 3.8 GPA. I'm the quarterback of the team. We're playing for the state championship this Friday night. We're probably going to win. He said, I'm dating a great girl here at this school. We're involved in a wonderful youth group at our church. I've got a wonderful home. I said, okay, forgiveness. I said, I get that. I was sexually abused, and 22 years after I'd been abused, I ran into the person. My life unraveled. I'd never dealt with my emotions. And if you and I don't deal with our emotions, they deal with us.
Yeah.
I said, I had to choose to forgive because when I forgave, I got free. He said, yeah, I heard you say that. So I raised my hand because there's people I need to forgive. I said, rejection. He said, yeah. He said, your story. I said, well, my mother called me 6 months before she died and said, when you were 4.5 years old, Dean, I emotionally abandoned you. We have no relationship. Stop acting like we do. That's called rejection. I
Wow.
said, but I learned that on the other side of rejection, we're all called, the Bible says we're accepted in the beloved. So I
Mm.
found my acceptance there. He said, yeah. I said, but suicide. And this young man, a junior in high school, with all of his great credentials, looked at me and said, Dean, you cannot begin to understand the pressure that I live with every day to have a performance-based life.
Hmm. That's
Then he
pretty
says,
insightful.
well, for a kid
Yeah.
that, yeah, for a
Yeah.
17-year-old kid, he says, every day, the performance mentality that I have to meet a certain metric every day on the football field, in sports, in relationships, at home, with my grades. He said, it's just too much. And then this has happened so many times, but it never, ever gets old. He says, I want to give you something. I said, what? And he reached into his pocket, and out of his pocket, he handed me a 12 gauge shotgun shell. And he said, today at 3:15, I was going to the 50-yard line to end my life.
Oh my
But
gosh.
you told me that my life matters, and I choose to believe that.
Oh my gosh.
He's got tears, I've got tears, and I'm like, man, I'm just so thankful you had the unimaginable guts to come tell me your story. Because what happens is when God's presence shows up, the Bible says, in the presence of the Lord is the fullness of joy. The joy of the Lord is the strength of his people. You get into God's presence, you're going to find strength. And he had, in that moment, for whatever reason, the strength of God hit his heart. Because it's never God's intention for someone to end their life. That's silly. God did not need your help getting into this thing called life. He doesn't need your help getting out of it, right?
Right.
The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Sure.
So that's
Yeah.
what I tell students. Here's the $100 billion question. What does that enemy know about your life that he's trying to talk you out of it? He's so petrified you're going to get there that he's trying to get you to end it.
Hmm.
Catch that revelation.
That's a really good
Understand,
point.
man, there's no telling what you're called to do.
Way to reframe it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, very cool. So, what would you say? I'm assuming that you've had some critics that will argue that the idea of just understanding how much you matter and how much God loves you is an oversimplification of the issues of anxiety and depression and mental health issues. What would you say to that argument?
They're right. It's simple.
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't try to overcomplicate this. I talk to
Sure.
teenagers.
That's great.
And for those who don't agree with me, that's wonderful. I mean, I cannot tell you how much I just don't care. I mean, it's because I see these students every day. I've spoken with millions of teenagers face to face. I mean, this is what I do.
Yeah.
And I don't have all the answers. And I would never, and I tell students that I'm not here to talk you into something,
Hmm.
because if I could talk you into something, someone so much better than me could talk you out of it.
Hmm.
I'm here to offer you truth as I understand truth. And here's the cool thing about truth. Truth is always true.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about changing it. It's going to be true today as it was. So yes, and I'm a massive, I mean, from stage, a massive proponent of well-educated Christian-based counseling.
Hmm.
I'm a product of it.
Hmm.
I mean, when I when I ran into the person 22 years after I'd been sexually abused, I was in a Home Depot, which, and if you knew me well, you would laugh hysterically because me and a Home Depot, just those two things don't go together. But I had two of our kids. I walked down aisle 21, I turned right, and I literally walked right into the person.
Oh, wow.
And I went home, and my wife said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Not right now." And about an hour later, I said, "I need to tell you something. I've never had the guts to tell anybody." And I said, "I was sexually abused when I was 15. And today, for the first time, 22 years later, I ran into the person. And
Mhm.
my life is spiraling."
Right.
And she said, "Dean, I mean, she literally had tears. She said, everything makes sense." She said, "We've got to get you help." And I was like, this is pride. No, I don't need help.
Mhm.
I got this.
Yeah.
She says, "If you had just been given a diagnosis, a real serious medical would you go to a doctor?" Absolutely. She said, "This is no different. We have to get you." And I went to a counselor, and he looked at me and he said, I know what you do. I know who you are, and I don't care. I don't want to talk to you about your ministry. I don't want to talk about your message. I care about you," he said. And that was new to me.
Mm.
I said, "What would it look like?" He said, "Well, it would begin a conversation." It's a conversation that lasted 11 years.
Mm.
And in my iPad, I carry 11 years of notes
Mhm.
from those sessions because it helped me better understand that I
Mhm.
was broken. I was living life in a very, very broken state because I had never dealt with the pain. And what does pain do but seek pleasure?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, what do hurting people do? We all know the answer to that. They hurt people. And
Mhm.
so, I was trying to figure out, how can I be used by God to help people not want to end their life, not live hopeless, but yet the I never truly believed until I finally got this revelation. I never believed that I mattered.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
what became my message?
sure that you
You
matter.
matter.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Oh, that
it
makes
became the platform.
right. It's so interesting to me how much power there is in terms of being able to understand your own story in terms of words. If you can put words to it and say, this is the core issue, sort through all the mess, like there's all these
Yep.
loud feelings that can crowd things out and make it very difficult. And I think a lot of believers, probably as you maybe thought at the beginning, that like me and God, we should be able to deal with this alone. And I think a lot of that also, like maybe some people can, but I think a lot of that has to do with how good are you at being able to distill your emotions down to the core belief and recognizing
Right.
whether that's a lie or it's the truth? And what does God's word say about this? And having an outside perspective that can help clarify that, particularly when you're in the midst of all the mire of your own emotions, is invaluable.
Totally agree. Totally.
Right.
Because it comes to a point where, Jesus sent him out in pairs for a reason.
Hmm.
A lone ranger does not do real well.
Hmm.
There's
Right.
it's like when I go into a high school, my first thing to talking to a high school principal when I get there, our team has got everything set up, all the details are worked out. But when I get there, my first thing is I want to meet the principal and say to them, he or she, tell me my boundaries. How far can I take my message? Because my belief is I cannot have any authority in my life unless I'm under an authority,
Yeah, right. Hmm.
right? So when I go into a school, I put myself under the authority of that principal. And as a result, we're now over 4,300 events. There's not one school that I could not go back into because I never crossed the lines they give me. I'm not there to bring confusion or challenge. I'm there to help. And
Hmm.
what happens is so many students respond that the counselors in schools, the principals, the teachers, they are so literally overwhelmed by the response because nobody's asking the simple questions.
Yeah,
How you doing today? How's life? You
right.
know, and it's just literally 48 hours ago. I did three assemblies,
Hmm.
and the number of kids who responded to my three questions at those three assemblies were just astonishing because they're truly hurting and they're not getting what they need for the most part at home.
Right. Yeah. So, when you're in a non-Christian school, and I'm assuming that in most cases they don't want you to give an invitation to give your life to Jesus, uh,
Yes.
how do you handle that? How,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, it's 75% of the schools I do are public.
right. Okay.
And I always share my story. I call mom's story. Because that's my story. I can always share it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what I do is, I have stories from the road. It's like Jesus. When he ministered, if people really study his life, Jesus told parables wrapped in principles.
Mhm.
He
Right.
was a storyteller.
Right.
And that's really what we ascribe to do. I share stories, testimonies from the road of students I've met, I've got like the young man I mentioned earlier in this
Yeah.
time with you, I have so many of those types of stories, but they
Mhm.
all have a point to them. His was
Sure.
a performance-based life.
Mhm.
Others, it's a young lady who handed me a razor blade that was bloodstained because she hurt herself to stop the pain and she cut herself. It was another one is an eating disorder. A story there of how a varsity cheerleader was the most popular girl in the entire school, and no one knew she was suffering from an eating disorder. Kids come tell me all these stories because I'm the safest guy they're ever going to talk to because they know I'm leaving,
Right. Yeah.
right? So in sharing those stories, I wrap the principles around them, and then I say to this: the assembly's getting ready to be over. I can't really come to you, but if you want to come talk with me, I'd love to stay and hear your stories. They line up for 45 minutes to an hour,
Mhm.
and I listen. I
Yeah.
just sit there and listen
Mhm.
because it's not, here's what I tell parents, and this is something that I have learned in talking with so many students. It's not that your teenager wants to talk with you, it is that they desperately need to be heard by you.
Mhm.
They have to be heard because if they don't feel heard or seen, then they don't feel like they matter. And
Yeah.
that takes them down a slippery slope very fast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so what do you I'm not sure whether in the context of these assemblies, do you make recommendations as far as like what do you do with the social media? Because it's still there once they leave the assemblies. Does that enter into it of here's how you can try to protect yourself from some of the messaging of the world, that kind of thing?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't go deep into that. What I do is I invite students to come take a look at our content because I
Mhm.
know what we're creating is safe. I know what we're creating is based on a truth
Right.
that says your life does matter. And
Right.
so I encourage students to understand what social media really is. And when the very first convention I ever did was in 1993. That's a long time ago. And I asked the question, there were 600 kids there. I said, how many of you have a cell phone? Three raised their hand.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
you ought to see teenagers. When I tell that to teenagers today, they're like, "Oh my gosh!"
right.
And in 1993, the internet was just coming online,
Right.
and
Yeah.
social media was not even a thing yet. I
Right.
mean, wrap your mind around that, teenager, that
Yeah.
there was no such thing at one point as social media.
Mhm.
And what's interesting, and most parents will freak out at a level that cannot even be comprehended on this next sentence. CDC numbers tell me that the average teenager today spends 9 hours a day on their device.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
Doing what?
Yeah.
I grabbed my phone the other day and I went to TikTok and I just started scrolling.
Uh-huh.
48 minutes later, I looked up and I was like, well, there's 48 minutes that are forever gone.
Yeah, seriously.
But I realized how addictive it was.
Mhm.
It
That's
and that
not
algorithm
nice.
when the
Yeah.
algorithm kicks in,
Yep.
I mean,
Mhm.
it throws everything that you're looking at in your direction.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Interesting. So, what have I not asked you that you want to make sure you leave with our audience?
I really think you've covered everything I was going to cover.
Okay.
Obviously, this is not your first time to ask questions to someone.
Oh, well, I'm so glad.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it's been a joy to just share a little bit about our message in ministry and why I wrote the You Matter book and what it's doing out there and helping teenagers understand why they matter.
Fantastic. So, where can people go who want to learn more about you and to get copies of your book?
Yeah, the quickest way is just you can go to Amazon. The book is just called You Matter,
Right.
or you can go to youmatter.us, our website, and it's got all things related to everything that we do.
Awesome. So, I will link to that in the show notes. And thank you, Dina. This is a really important message. Thank you for being here to share it.
Well, thank you so very much.
Absolutely.